Hey, Scooby! Scooby, Scooby Doo, looking for you. Scooby, Scooby Doo, where are ya? All the stars are here, waiting for you. Couldn't have a show without ya. Scooby, Scooby Doo, Scooby, Scooby Doo.
Hello, Scooby Doo fans! Welcome to my Season 2 Episode 5 review of the new Scooby Doo movies. So last time I continued my 2024 Halloween special with a review of Season 2 Episode 4 of the new Scooby Doo movies. I hope you guys enjoyed that review. But of course today, I'll be covering Season 2 Episode 5 of the new Scooby Doo movies, titled The Exterminator, which was released on October 6, 1973. The short synopsis of the episode is, Don Adams is working as a bug exterminator, who has been contracted by the bank to exterminate insects in the house of an old film director named Lauren Chumley. Chumley's butler tries to persuade Don Adams and the gang to leave, but Adams will not be deterred, despite many strange things happening in the house. Today's guest star is Don Adams. Who is Don Adams? Well, he has very two memorable roles that you might know him from. If you're someone who's old school and was around in the 60s and 70s, the show you're probably going to be most familiar with from him is Get Smart. You know, that's his most famous role, Maxwell Smart. If you're someone in my age demographic, you probably know him from Inspector Gadget, which was his other memorable role. He obviously has other stuff that happened in his career that, you know, he was a big part of. But those are his two most memorable roles, and outside of that, you know, Don Adams is not a very well-known name. Unless if you're either a big Get Smart fan or a big Inspector Gadget fan, you probably aren't too familiar with Don Adams. So just in case if you aren't aware who Don Adams is, here's just a quick rundown of who he is. So Don Adams was an American actor and stand-up comedian. He was born on April 13th, 1923 in Manhattan, New York, and he began his acting career in 1962 in the film The Longest Day, where he went uncredited as Lieutenant Junior Grade Mackenzie. Don Adams was definitely more of a TV guy, but when it comes to films, his other two memorable roles, film-wise, that you might be familiar with, is The Nude Bomb, where he played Maxwell Smart, and the 1999 film version of Inspector Gadget, where he voiced Brain the Dog. Television was definitely Don Adams' bread and butter, as he definitely was more prevalent in the TV space. So in television, his memorable roles include The Bill Dana Show, where he played Byron Glick. He was in The Tennessee Tuxedos and His Tales, where he voiced Tennessee Tuxedo from 1963 all the way up to 1966. Then there's his most memorable role, which is, of course, Get Smart, where he played Maxwell Smart from 1965 all the way up to 1970. He was on The Carol Burnett Show, where he played himself. He did a TV movie called Confessions of a Top Crime Buster, where he played Detective Lenny Crook. He did The Partners, where he once again played Detective Lenny Crook from 1971 all the way up to 1972. Then he had his own show called The Don Adams Screen Test, where he played himself for 13 episodes in 1975. Then we have his other titular character, Inspector Gadget, where he voiced Inspector Gadget from 1983 all the way up to 1985. He did the TV movie Get Smart Again, where he once again played Maxwell Smart. He did the TV special Inspector Gadget Saves Christmas, where he once again voiced Inspector Gadget. He did another version of Get Smart, where he played once again Maxwell Smart for 7 episodes in 1995. Then there's Gadget Boy and Heather, where he voiced Gadget Boy. Inspector Gadget's Field Trip, where he once again voiced Inspector Gadget from 1996 up to 1998. Gadget Boy's Adventures in History, where he once again voiced Gadget Boy from 1997 up to 1998. And Pepper Ann, where he voiced Principal Hickey from 1997 all the way up to 2000. Now, at the time of recording this, Don Adams has sadly passed away. He passed away on September 25th, 2005 in Los Angeles, California. Now, at the time of this episode, Don Adams was only really doing two other things. He was doing a TV special, and he was voicing another character in another Hanna-Barbera cartoon, which you can go look into onto his, his acting credits if you wanted to find out what he was doing in 1973. But that's essentially what he was doing besides that. Not really anything major or big. Just a TV special, and then he voiced a character in another Hanna-Barbera cartoon that wasn't really that huge. So as per usual, I'll be watching Season 2, Episode 5 of the new Scooby Doo movies on the new Scooby Doo Movies, the Almost Complete Collection. This Almost Complete Collection has every episode of the new Scooby Doo movies, minus the Addams Family episode. However, you can go on HBO Max right now. If you want to know why the Addams Family episode has never been released physically, then you can check out my video where I go more in depth on it. So what's my experience with Don Adams? I'm personally not familiar with Don Adams that much. I have heard of his two titular roles, Maxwell Smart and Inspector Gadget. However, I've never watched either show. I've never seen the Get Smart shows where he plays Maxwell Smart, and I've never seen any of the Inspector Gadget shows where he played Inspector Gadget. So those are two different franchises that I've not watched or been a part of. I've obviously heard of them, but I've never actually seen them. This episode of Scooby-Doo is really my only familiarity with him. However, I do want to ask you guys, what's your experience with Don Adams? Are you a big fan of like Get Smart or Inspector Gadget or both? Or do you like him from some other things? You know, what's your experience with Don Adams? Or are you like me and not really familiar with the guy and not really familiar with his work? I love to know. So tell me, your experience with Don Adams, and what do you think of him as a guest star in the new Scooby Doo movies? Do you like him? Do you not like him? Do you think he was a good fit? Not so much, Tell me all about it in the comments below and let me know. Now, as far as this episode's reception is concerned, I believe most fans do like this episode. I've heard it been, be praised by, people in the Scooby Doo community. It's definitely, one of the better praised, episodes of the new Scooby Doo movies. A lot of people consider it one of the better episodes of the series, and they particularly like it, probably because there's probably a good portion of them who are probably big fans of Don Adams and are probably familiar with his work, especially with Inspector Gadget and Get Smart. Those are two very big properties. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's the reason why a lot of people love this crossover, because they love seeing Don Adams in an episode. But what do I think of this episode? Do I think it is a good episode that finally will break the streak of mid-episodes where we've just been stuck at 3 stars for the past 4 episodes? Is it going to be a bad episode and break that streak in a bad way? Or is it once again going to be in the middle, and are we going to have 5 episodes in a row that are just completely mid, completely average in the middle, and are 3 stars? Well, let's find out, shall we? So let's take a look at the episode to see whether I think it is a good or bad episode of the new Scooby Doo movies. The episode begins with the gang driving through Hollywood and looking at celebrity homes. We get some nice fake takes on certain celebrities such as Gregory Grant and Steve McKing. The gang then spot Don Adams stuck on the side of the road in his Adams Exterminator tow truck. Don has a side hustle as an exterminator, but he has no car and is running late to exterminate a house. The gang volunteer to help, and they drive Don to the house in the Mystery Machine. Don hires the gang as his assistants, and the gang accepts. As they pull up, we learn that the house is Horror Hill, and it belongs to the famous Lauren Chumley, who is a famous horror movie star, and Shaggy's not really impressed with the house, obviously because it looks creepy as shit. It also doesn't help that Don Adams tells the rumor that 15 exterminators have gone to that house and no one's heard a word from them since. That's not going to help Shaggy and Scooby get to your cause and bring them in there. I also find it funny that when they're walking up to the house, Velma, kind of trolls everybody a little bit because she's talking about this movie called Strangers Beware and is freaking out Shaggy, Scooby, and Daphne. And Daphne keeps telling her to stop, but she keeps going, and it's kind of funny. And then Daphne claps back at her and tells her to be quiet. So, yeah, Velma did push some buttons there. But I gotta be honest, that was kind of funny, that Velma, was, kind of trolling them a little bit. I mean, it's not nice to make your friends really scared like that, but still, it was kind of funny having Velma do that. And Daphne just having enough and breaking Daphne to a point where she yells at Velma to stop. Knocking on the door, we meet the butler named Otto, who lets Don and the gang in. Don also explains to the gang that the bank is selling this house and they hired Don to get rid of all the bugs. Daphne is just happy to be inside a Hollywood home, and the gang marvel at all the quirky decorations. As they walk about, lots of weird things happen that Shaggy fears are ghosts. However, Don explains it away as probably just termites. Before they set off on their extermination gig, Otto warns them to tread carefully as the house is full of unspeakable terror. Shaggy and Scooby find this out fast as a portrait comes to life and gives them a scare. This portrait looks a lot similar to Swampy Pete from the first Harlem Globetrotters episode, The Ghostly Creep from the Deep, which is very interesting. Running to hide, they soon run into a werewolf and Frankenstein monster that are quite like, the werewolf from A Gaggle of Galloping Ghosts. It looks a lot like him, actually. And Otto once again tells them that strangers are not welcome and he can't be responsible for the consequences that will occur if they stay. This obviously doesn't deter Mr. Adams and the gang. So the gang continue to spray down the house, and we get plenty of gags from the gang encountering several haunted props and sinister figures. So what's a first instance of this is when Don Adams has Shaggy and Scooby spray a certain room, and there was a funny little scene where where Shaggy's finger gets stuck in the armor, Scooby sprays it, and then a fucking headless armor runs away, and there's just a lot of funny jokes and hijinks in there, which is very entertaining. Shaggy and Scooby have great humor in this episode, which is why I like it a lot. But yeah, it's a funny little scene. That's definitely one of the funnier gags of the episode.
Oh wow, there's plenty of places for bugs to hide in this setup. Let's check this suit of armor for moths.
Moths?
Sure. You've heard of the iron butterfly, right?
Uh-huh.
So maybe they've also got iron moths.
Oh, brother.
Enough grousing. Let's start delousing. Yep. Something's got me. Hey! Let go! Quick, Scooby, the spray!
What?
Did you just see what I just saw? Please say no.
Yes.
Some pal you are. He forgot his head! You! That's a load off my shoulders.
Yeah, and onto mine.
Whoops. Sorry about that, Scoob.
Several portraits continue to come to life, and we get some spooky encounters with Mr. Hyde and Frankenstein's monster. We get this funny umbrella scene where Scooby also trolls Shaggy by scaring him a little bit, and, them, deciding whether they want to go down into the corridor or not, and flipping a coin, and encountering another scary prop. Just more fun little gags and jokes in the scene.
Maybe this door leads outside. It's a corridor. Sure is spooky in there.
Spooky.
Did you have to say it like that?
Spooky.
That's even worse.
Spooky. Spooky, spooky, spooky. Spooky, spooky. Spooky, 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 spooky. Spooky, spooky, spooky.
Forget it. It's either the corridor or back to the hallway. Which way should we go?
I don't know.
I'll flip a coin. Heads we go in there, and tails we go back there. We go in there.
About halfway through the episode, we learn that Otto is in cahoots with a sinister-looking man who is purposely haunting the house. The two men get back to their haunting, and we get a funny scene where one of them dresses up as an exterminator and joins the gang in spraying the house down for bugs. It's a little bit creepy, the fourth exterminator, coming in and joining Fred, Daphne, Velma. Interesting to note here is that Fred, Daphne, Velma wear protective gear while doing the spray, which, to be fair, that's what I would that's what I would assume would be the case. Like, you know, you want to protect your body from that stuff. But I find it odd that they're the only ones that do this. We never seen Don Adams sport this, which is odd because he says that he's a longtime exterminator. This is a side hustle. Surely he would know that he needs some protection equipment to help, you know, protect his body. And Shaggy and Scooby never do it either. Maybe because they don't know any better. They didn't probably check the label. But they seem to be fine. So it's just odd that, you know, Fred, Daphne, Velma wear protective gear, but they don't do that with Shaggy, Scooby, and Don Adams. I guess it's fine because Shaggy, Scooby, and Don Adams don't get sick or anything, and it doesn't affect them. But still, that's very dangerous of them to not wear protective gear like that. I guess maybe the animators were just too lazy or just threw in this detail and didn't feel like throwing in any sort of continuity with that, or were too lazy to draw up, like, you know, 3 more, you know, models of Shaggy, Scooby, and Don Adams dressed in, you know, protective gear, and they just wanted it to be more like a small bit for, like, a scare scene, maybe. That's what I'm assuming. But still, it's very odd. I do like the hallway scene with Shaggy and Scooby, where they hear a ghostly wailing, and then they get freaked out, and then there's this, like, little hairy monster hand that comes out when they're trying to decide who will lead the way. And then, you know, they meet back up with Don Adams after being separated from him. And, you know, they end up getting ready to go into the pool room. But there's a lot of fun hijinks and, you know, little jokes in that hallway scene. Shaggy and Scooby just have a lot of fun gags and, you know, jokes throughout the episode.
There's no telling what's in this corridor, Scoob. Stick close to me. Ah! Not that close, Scoob. What was that? I know what it sounded like, but what was it?
It's me?
It sounded like it came from over there, Scoob. Go over there and see what it was. I'm coming. I'm right behind you. Go on, Scoob. I'll stay back here so nobody will sneak up on you from behind.
Oh, you go first.
I'll tell you what, Scoob. I'll choose you to see who goes first. Odd or even?
Even?
Okay, I got odd. 4 fingers. That's even. 3 arms are odd, but odd or even, I go first. Footsteps. What'll we do? We can't go back to those paintings. It's Mr. Adams.
Oh, spraying the ceiling, eh? Where's your tank? Which reminds me, where's my tank?
Something took them. Oh, this house is haunted.
Haunted? Who believes in haunted houses?
I do.
And Scooby Doo do, too.
It's just your imagination. Freddie and the girls probably borrowed them. Maybe they're in here. It's stuck.
Let's try another door.
In another house.
Don't worry, I'll kick it open. I have a black belt in karate. Aya! Would you believe a short truce belt?
The door's opening.
Naturally. It's afraid I was going to kick it again. It's an indoor swimming pool.
Now that's what I call class.
We then get another fun scene that happens in the pool room, and the pool room, you know, scene is actually quite interesting. We get a few little jokes and gags. We probably get the most prominent of the villain's costume, which is the little sea monster, which supposedly is a fun nod to the creature from the Black Lagoon, although I have not seen the creature from the Black Lagoon, so I can't say for certain if it is. But interestingly enough, when Shaggy and Scooby are in the water, they say they can't swim, which is odd because they've been able to swim quite fine like not only in the original series, but in this series alone, they've been pretty well at like swimming. You know, they've never shown this side of them before, and I don't think they showed this again. So I find it odd that they make it in this episode that Shaggy and Scooby can't swim, when clearly in other episodes they can swim. They know how to swim. We've seen them swim properly before, so it's just very inconsistent with Shaggy and Scooby's character, not only in the original series, but in this series as well. Like, just a lot of weird inconsistencies throughout the new Scooby Doo movies that they don't really follow through with. But it's not really the only series that does this. Obviously, other series sometimes don't follow through with stuff they bring up in other episodes. But I don't know. Where Are You was a little bit better with, when it had something with a character, it would stick with it. Whereas I feel like the new Scooby Doo movies, they come up with an idea and then they forget about it. Like, Shaggy being allergic to straw, or, Shaggy and Scooby not being able to swim. Like, just very odd choices. And then, Shaggy, Scooby, and Don Adams get frightened by Fred in his protective equipment. And what the hell was Fred doing? Like, why was he walking out like he's Frankenstein's monster, as well as Daphne Velma? Were they trying to scare Don Adams, Shaggy, and Scooby? They said they were trying to, he's like, oh, why'd they run off like that? Maybe because you fucking creeped up on them like that, Fred? You don't think, like, you were being a little bit creepy? Why don't you take off the mask and say, hey, wait. Like, it's me, it's Fred. We just found the secret passage. Like, of course they're going to be frightened if they see a odd dude in an exterminator costume that looks scary like that. Although you think maybe Don Adams would pick up on it and be like, oh, maybe it might be one of the gang, but that just goes to show that, like, he doesn't, like I said before, it's clear he doesn't use protective equipment at all while he's doing his exterminating, so. The gang then reunite in the projection room, but are soon chased out by a haunted popcorn machine and dozens of bats. They then run into an elevator, which carries them to Lauren Chumley's theatrical storeroom. Up there, they find the missing exterminator equipment that had gone missing earlier. After a few more haunted experiences, we soon see Otto directing Mr. Chumley as a werewolf-like cat creature. It turns out they are trying to get a comeback going for Lauren Chumley, and they have secretly been recording a movie so he can get some money to buy his house back from the bank. Scooby and Shaggy are unaware of this and accidentally trap Otto and Chumley. Don unmasks Chumley, who was wearing a few masks, and Chumley reveals that he was trying to scare the exterminators off, as there was a clause in the agreement that the house needed to be sprayed down before it could be sold. And the episode ends with the gang volunteering to help finish Chumley's movie instead of exterminating the house. I'm going to give Season 2, Episode 5 of the new Scooby Doo Movies 3 stars out of 5. Genuinely, guys, like, I'm not trying to do this on purpose. Like, it genuinely is another 3 out of 5 episode. I really thought this episode would finally break the streak of mid-episodes, but yet again, it's another 3-star episode. It almost wasn't, but not in a good way. It almost could have been 2 stars. Thankfully, it did enough to get 3. But yeah, I mean, this season just really has not been able to break this trend of 3 stars. And we have 3 episodes left, and I'm wondering if any of them will fucking break it. I'm praying they will, but I don't know if they will. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not genuinely trying to do this on purpose. Like, I genuinely just think that these episodes have been back-to-back just, mid. They've just been so mid and so in the middle. And I would say that I had a lot of fun with this episode. It's definitely what I consider a fun, flawed, average episode. Very similar to Josie and the Pussycats. I have more problems with it, more negatives than I do positives, but it's still a fun, flawed, and average episode for me. It had enough fun in it and enjoyable aspects in it for me to, give it a 3. Otherwise, it would have been a 2. But before I get into my negatives and what brings this episode down a lot, I'll go into my positives for the episode first and what I liked about it. Starting with the positives, my first one is that I like Daphne in this episode being cowardly. Daphne was very cowardly in this episode, just like Shaggy and Scooby. Obviously not like every second of the episode, but she was pretty cowardly, and it was kind of cool seeing her, scared again, and, not really liking being in this house and being weirded out by everything and being like Shaggy and Scooby and being more cowardly. So I thought that was good for Daphne. And I also did like the moment where she clapped back at Velma when Velma was like scaring them, you know, on their walk to the house. And she's like, you know, just be quiet, be silent. Like, if the movie's silent, why can't you be? Like, she's just like clapping back at her, telling her to like be quiet, you know, because she's tired of being scared. Like, she's already on edge. Like, she doesn't want to be scared anymore. She's told Velma to stop and she hasn't. So, I mean, Velma did deserve that, but, you know, at the same time, like I said, Velma wasn't. That was a fun little moment of Velma's, you know, freaking them out a little bit. Shaggy and Scooby were their usual funny, cowardly selves. Like, you know, they really, you know, they were quite entertaining in this episode. They were a lot of fun. I especially like their chemistry with Don Adams in this episode, and I'll get more into that when I talk about Don Adams. But their chemistry with Don Adams was good, and I did like how they were their usual funny, cowardly selves. They were very funny in this episode. They had a lot of humorous moments, a lot of funny gags, a lot of funny jokes. And, you know, they played off of each other well and Don Adams well. And, you know, no complaints from me here. I had a lot of fun with Shaggy and Scooby in this episode. Then we have the guest star of the episode, Don Adams. How was Don Adams? I really liked Don Adams in this episode. Don Adams was fantastic. In fact, he really was the main reason why I had a lot of fun with this episode. For one thing, you know, Don Adams was great because he was a good leader in this episode. You know, this was his operation. He was an exterminator. He was leading the gang and exterminating the house. And even when they were investigating, he was very much a leader. But he also had good chemistry with Shaggy and Scooby due to his funny nature, you know, with his, you know, when he was exterminating. What I liked about Don Adams is that he was able to go back and forth between being a straight man and a comedic relief. He was a straight man and a leader when it came to, you know, weird occurrences and ghostly hauntings and stuff like that, and explaining it away and investigating. But he was funny when he was with Shaggy and Scooby and he was exterminating and dealing with bugs and, you know, termites and all that. And, you know, it was really cool having a guest star that was multi-dimensional and had different, you know, could be both sides of the coin, could be straight-laced like Fred and Velma, but also funny and a bit cowardly like Shaggy and Scooby. So Don Adams had the full package in this episode, and he was so fun in this episode. His dynamic with Shaggy and Scooby was really fun and really entertaining. He was just a fun guy to watch. Like, he really played off of Shaggy and Scooby so well, and the fact that he was able to be both the straight man and the comedic relief really made this episode so good for, you know, for a lot of reasons. You know, it made him such a good guest star because I think he's one of the few guest stars, maybe the only one, that was able to go back and forth between on both sides of the coin and being able to be both, you know, the straight man and leading the way, but also being funny and being a bit of comedic relief when he was dealing with bugs and termites and, you know, being a bit cowardly at certain points, but also could be a leader and investigate stuff and take charge when, you know, when he needed to from throughout most of the episode. So I really had a lot of fun with Don Adams. I think this episode, fun nature, owes a lot to Don Adams. He really made this episode a fun and enjoyable one. Despite its many flaws, Don Adams was certainly not one of them. In fact, he was really the driving force of this episode. Him, Shaggy, and Scooby had such a fun dynamic that I just had a fun time watching Don Adams interact with Shaggy and Scooby, and just, you know, being able to be both the straight man and the comedic relief. I had a lot of fun with Don Adams. He really elevated this episode. Fantastic guest star. No complaints with him whatsoever. He certainly helped elevate this episode. So, Don Adams, great guest star. Loved him. And, you know, definitely one of the better guest stars of the new Scooby Doo movies. Then we have the motive of the episode. So the motive was actually really good in this episode. The villain's motive was that they were scaring the exterminators away so that they could finish filming their movie and then buy their house back from the bank after they released this movie and get the financial support they needed to buy it back from the bank. So this was actually really cool because, no, it wasn't really the villains weren't really evil in this episode. They were just trying to get their house back and make a good comeback. You know, not only jumpstart, you know, Lauren Chumley's career, but Lauren Chumley also wanted to save his house. And he only scared the exterminators away so that he could just finish his movie and buy his house back from the bank. So I really liked the motive. I felt it was unique and fresh and different, and was a good-hearted motive. Like, it wasn't an evil motive. He wasn't, being a criminal. He wasn't doing it for nefarious reasons. He was just doing it because he just genuinely didn't want to lose his house. He wanted to jumpstart his career again. And he wasn't going to hurt anybody. He just wanted the exterminators out of the house so that he could finish his movie and then just, get and then buy the house back from the bank. So I really like the uniqueness of the motive, and I realized that, throughout the series, the one thing the new Scooby Doo movies has mostly done well is the motive of the villains. They've done a really good job making the motives, very unique, very fresh, very, inventive, and for that, I really appreciate that they at least do that. So I think this was a good motive for the villains. I liked seeing a change of pace and having villains that had a good motive and good intentions, and not necessarily evil intentions or an evil motive or a criminal motive. They just genuinely wanted to make a comeback in his career and just, get his house back from the bank. He had no intentions of harming the exterminators or, Don Adams or the gang. He just wanted them out of the house so that he could finish, so that, the bank wouldn't, sell his house, and he would be able to finish his film and then buy it back from the bank. So I like the motive. Very unique, very fresh, very different. So no complaints from me here. And my final positive is that I thought the setting of the episode was actually really good and unique. So a house is not necessarily something new for Scooby-Doo. We've had creepy houses before. But what makes this house great is that I love that we got to explore a horror film star's Hollywood house. This is a really cool idea. We get to explore a Hollywood home of a horror movie star, and we get to a lot of variety in the setting because we get to explore all these cool rooms. We get to explore just a Hollywood home in general, but we also get to explore a horror film star's Hollywood home. So it really is cool that we get to it's unique and different and fresh, because it's a Hollywood home, a spooky Hollywood home, thanks to, it being a horror film star, if a horror film star's Hollywood home. And you have all these different rooms that you can explore, like the pool room and the theater room, and, just all this little cool stuff, all these portraits and stuff. Like, it was a really cool setting, and I very much liked that we got to see the gang, explore Hollywood home. I think that's a nice, interesting setting that we haven't had yet before, where we explore a creepy Hollywood home. I think that's a really cool idea. So, setting was great. That's all I got for for positives. So I think it's about time to get on to the negatives of the episode and what I didn't like about the episode. Starting off with the negatives, my first one is that I didn't really like Fred and Velma in this episode. I thought they were underutilized and weak and non-existent in this episode. Yes, Fred and Velma had their moments, but it wasn't enough. They had small moments here and there, but they really didn't do anything throughout the episode. I really didn't feel much when it came to Fred and Velma. I thought Daphne, Shaggy, and Scooby had a lot more going on with them in this episode. I think Fred and Velma were just very underutilized, very non-existent. And that's probably because, Fred really didn't have a chance to be a leader in this episode because Don Adams was being a leader, which is good because, I don't mind the guest star being the leader. But Fred didn't really have any sort of leadership, and he didn't piece together any clues to help solve the mystery. He also wasn't cowardly or comedic or anything. And same with Velma. Velma wasn't really much of a leader either. She didn't really piece together the clues to help solve the mystery. She wasn't cowardly or comedic, so they just didn't really have anything for them in this episode, and they were just practically non-existent and underutilized in this episode. I found the villain of the episode to be pretty weak in my mind. So, the villain is very similar to Zalia C. Fairchild from Sandy Duncan's Jekyll and Hyde episode. Very much a guy who's, dressing up in different outfits. Now, to be fair, his butler Otto could have been in one of those costumes, although it's never really shown who's in the costumes. I'm more inclined to believe that Otto just knew about the plan and operation, but I don't think he was really involved in it. I think Lauren Chumley was the dude that was mostly doing the dressing up and was in the costumes. The reason I have an issue with it here versus Zalia Z. Fairchild is Fairchild had distinguishing costumes, and all of his costumes had uniqueness to them, and stood out in some way. With Lauren Chumley, I felt like his costumes didn't really stand out at all. I think the closest to a main villain you have here is his sea monster costume and the portrait of him, the portrait look-alike of Swampy Pete. But outside of that, I mean, I like the variety, don't get me wrong, but there was no consistency throughout to help distinguish these costumes, which made it feel like that there really wasn't a main villain in this episode. There was no main costume, no main defining villain. Fairchild at least had Mr. Hyde as his main villain, and maybe the White Ghost, if you want to argue that, at the beginning. There were points in the episode where he had, where he was wearing a costume for an extended period of time. Lauren Chumley never really did that, and I get he's supposed to, be the man of, 1,000 faces, and, he's dressing up in different costumes, but, still, you can have variety and at least have some consistency, at least, dress up as some villain for an extended period of time. I'm not saying for the whole entire episode, just for a good portion of the episode would have been nice, and he didn't do that. He didn't do that at all, so... it was honestly, just weak on the villain front. I just could not find any consistency with the villain, and I could not find any sort of main villain in the episode, and none of his villains stood out. Like I said, the closest was the sea monster in the pool room, and the Swampy Pete lookalike in the portrait, so... I have to say the villain was weak, despite being similar to Fairchild, whereas Fairchild succeeded and was able to make each costume unique and stand out and fresh and was able to have a distinguishing main villain persona. I don't feel like Lauren Chumley had that, so to me, the villain was very weak in this episode. There just was not a standout villain costume at all. He changed way too often. And I just could not find any sort of consistency, and the variety, while being good, none of his costumes stood out, like I said, so weak villain in my mind. Outside of costume, Lauren Chumley is pretty unimpressive. The reason he's unimpressive is we don't really get to know much about Lauren Chumley as a person. We don't really see much of him, and we don't get to know him as a person. We just know him as the movie star, the horror film star. We don't know him as a person. We don't get to know him, before, he's dressing up. We just see his butler, Otto. And yes, Otto technically was involved in it, but it really was Chumley who was the main driving force of the episode. It was really the singular villain. I really feel like Otto just knew about the plan, but I don't think he dressed up at all. I think he was involved in it a little bit, but I don't really consider him part of the villain role or the outside of costume role. I think Lauren Chumley was really that, and even if I were to count Otto, I didn't really find Otto that impressive. He just kind of made vague threats and warnings. So, yeah, I mean, to me, Lauren Chumley wasn't impressive outside of costume because we never got to see him before he was unmasked, and we only knew about him as the horror film star and not as the person Lauren Chumley. So, yeah, he was just not really that impressive outside of costume. We don't get to know him at all. There was a lack of suspects in the episode. There was really only one suspect in the episode, which was Otto the butler. We never saw Lauren Chumley beforehand, so it's really just Otto. And yeah, technically Otto was part of the villain scheme, but it was really Lauren Chumley, like I said, who was the driving force and I felt was the singular villain of the episode. Because Otto, I don't feel like really dressed up. I think he just knew about the plan. Yeah, he was the butler, but he wasn't really the one that was the driving force, and I don't really consider him the main villain of the episode, or or any sort of villain in the episode. I think he was just helping Chumley out. I felt like he was a lackey. I think, it was really just Lauren Chumley who was the villain, and because we never saw Chumley beforehand or anybody else, we really only could suspect Otto. But even if I were to consider Otto the villain of the episode, again, there's only one dude as the suspect, And they make it clear, that he's in cahoots with the villain. Pretty, just about halfway through the episode, they make it very clear that he's in cahoots with the villain, the main villain of the episode. So, I mean, they don't try to hide it in this episode, who the villain is. So, they really could have done a lot better with the suspect front. They definitely could have, tried to make a couple more suspects in the episode. But they didn't, and, that definitely is a shame. There really wasn't any mystery throughout the episode. I didn't really sense any sort of mystery in the episode. Not really any sort of questions that I'm asking. Like, the gang were just helping Don Adams, exterminate this house. I didn't really feel like they were solving any sort of mystery. I think they just, encountered weird and strange things, and they found out what those weird and strange things were. Who was causing them. So, there really wasn't any sort of mystery throughout the episode, so that really stings too. Once again, there were no clues in this episode either. None at all. And that really doesn't surprise me, when we have no mystery here and not really that many suspects. So there weren't any clues in the episode, which sucks because we had clues in the last episode. And, once again, we're back to another episode where we just have no clues in the episode. Nothing to point towards anybody throughout the episode. So, yeah, it's unfortunate. But once again, the new Scooby Doo Movies goes back to having no clues in the episode. And my final negative is I found that there was no atmosphere in this episode. And that really was because I felt no tension or suspense or creepiness or eeriness, mainly because the villains really weren't threatening the gang's safety in any way. I wasn't on the edge of my seat wondering what was going to happen next. But there was nothing creepy or eerie going on in the house. It just was, there really was no sort of atmosphere in this episode. Mainly because the villain really had no consistency and, would dress up in so many costumes. But also nothing in the setting really provided anything creepy. But none of the villain's costumes were really creepy or scary either. They didn't really perform any sort of actions that made me feel any sort of tension or suspense. So yeah, not really any sort of atmosphere in this episode. Overall, guys, I would recommend this episode to fans and newcomers to the show. Despite its many issues and flaws, it's still a fun, flawed episode that's average. Mainly, it's saved and held up in large part thanks to the guest star, Don Adams. Don Adams really elevated this episode and really made it good. And honestly, had there been any other sort of negative and had it, then I think it would have been a 2-star or 1-star episode. But Don Adams and Shaggy and Scooby's dynamic really helped elevate this episode a lot, made it fun and enjoyable. So yeah, it's very flawed, very average, but I feel like you can have fun with it, like the Josie and the Pussycats episode. Thanks to really, in large part, to Don Adams and his dynamic with Shaggy and Scooby, and the fact that Don Adams can go from the straight man to the comedic relief. So yeah, despite its many flaws, it's still an enjoyable episode if you're in the right mood for it. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the review. Please give a like if you did. Comment down below your thoughts on the episode. Do you like this episode? Do you think there's more good in it than I do? Do you see more positives in it? Do you hate this episode? I'd be interested in that as well. Do you see more problems with it than I do? Or are you somewhere in the middle like me where you just think it's a fun, average, and flawed episode? I'm curious for your thoughts, so let me know. And subscribe for more Scooby Doo content like this, or if you're just interested in any of my other content. As per usual, I'll be continuing more with Scooby Doo, as Scooby Doo is the main focus of my channel and the driving force of my channel. I have plenty more to talk about with Scooby, not just TV show wise, but movie wise, gaming wise, and book wise, as well as other pieces of media that I get my hands on. So if you love Scooby, if you love talking about Scooby, and you love just all things Scooby, and you want to see Scooby get more love and representation on YouTube, then come join the channel and, experience some amazing Scooby content with me. In my next video, I will continue my 2024 Halloween special and probably end it off with a review of Season 2, Episode 6 of the new Scooby Doo Movies, titled The Weird Winds of Winona, guest starring Speed Buggy. And this is going to be a fun and interesting episode to cap off my 2024 Halloween special. I, very much I remember actually enjoying this episode. I've heard good things about it. So can Speed Buggy and his crew break this streak of mid-episodes and give me a really good episode? I hope so. Or are we going to be stuck at 6 mid-episodes in a row? Hopefully not, but we'll see if Speed Buggy can break the trend. I'm actually really excited about it. I remember liking the Speed Buggy episode and remember enjoying it a lot. So I have good expectations going into it. And yeah, if you want to know my thoughts on the Speed Buggy episode, then come join me, possibly on Halloween, which is when I'll probably upload it, or maybe sometime after that, we'll see. But I'm thinking I'll probably upload it on Halloween, and yeah, join me on Halloween to end, my Halloween special, and we'll talk about the Speed Buggy episode. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and as always, peace out.
Scooby, Scooby Doo, looking for you. Scooby, Scooby Doo, where are you? All the stars are here, waiting for you. Couldn't have a show without you. Scooby, Scooby Doo, Scooby.